Hey guys, it is the Nerdy Movie Guy. So today I'm going to be talking about The Evil Dead 2. So in this review, we're going to mention this movie and we're going to talk about it. And I got this set here. I mentioned last video, I have the Groovy Collection. Still don't know when I'll get around to the TV show, but I've watched both the movies. And I have not seen Army of Darkness yet, but I plan to very soon. And this movie was pretty interesting. There was a lot of different aspects to this one that the first one didn't have. So the first thing that we noticed is in the beginning, it sort of picks up exactly where the last one left off. And we sort of see him, what I interpret for most of this movie is people sort of wrestling with their own personal demons. I see him doing the same thing. We don't see that personal aspect of his character growth the way people would describe that phrase. So I don't know if this was supposed to be symbolic for that or if this was just simply just supposed to be just a part of the movie. So I don't know. That's sort of how I thought maybe I should have interpreted it, even though it's not treated the same as how people use the phrase. So I don't know. But in this movie, he wrestles with the demon inside of him for a majority of the movie. And so for this movie, unfortunately, because there's so many scenes with him wrestling with his arm and wrestling with the demon, sort of just doing things around the cabin, there's just a lot of those dramatic scenes that can be interesting, but it also doesn't leave any room for character growth. There is some pretty interesting stuff that happens to him, such as his girlfriend is sort of reanimated, and he's got to fight her again because everything in the woods is just going wrong. So he's sort of having to have a lot to deal with at one time, but there's so many scenes of him fighting the creatures that there's not a lot of room for character development, for him at least. Now, there are a handful of other characters, the people who speak on the recording about the Book of the Dead. There's a new woman who is the daughter of those people on the recording. And she's got a handful of characters with her that enter the cabin. And now you have more killables for a slasher horror movie. So they really don't serve a lot of purpose. And similar to the first one, because there's so much chaos going on, there's not a lot of room for character growth between them. There's not a lot of personal stories that they're talking about. There's not a lot they learn from or learn to do or say or act differently. They're just sort of just there. So that's the only problem I've had with these movies is there's just nothing about the characters to connect with on a personal level. And so it kind of takes you out of the moment. You can still have an enjoyable movie with some neat action and neat horror stuff going around. But if there's no one to connect to, then there's really nothing to root for. We still have Ash, and unfortunately, in movie 2, I think he gets less character development in this one than the last, unfortunately. So that is one downside to this movie, I would say, for me personally. There was also a lot of, I would say, gross parts about this movie. Now, granted, my opinion may not be as valid as others, only because I was trying to eat dinner while watching this movie. So maybe that made it more gross because I'm trying to chew on my food while there's goopy looking characters chewing on human hair. And there's just, it want to give me a gag reflex. I don't have a very strong stomach when it comes to gross stuff in horror movies. I can see hideous creatures, hideous people. I can see violence and blood and gore. But if it's something gross, that's where I draw the line. So there are a lot of horror movies I won't see just because of that fact alone. And I know there are horror fans screaming at me right now. But so that kind of tainted this movie experience, unfortunately, because I tried to have dinner while watching this movie. But the gross stuff aside, there is a lot of neat aspects of the story now, because in the last movie, The Book of the Dead is sort of something that takes the characters a while to figure out what it is and what's going on, because people understand most of that pretty quickly in this movie. You can sort of just dive into the horror elements with the fights between the creatures and stuff. So there was more of that. So if that's what you're looking for in a horror movie, this one had more. When you get to your final boss fight in this movie, that's what I'm calling it, final boss fight. There's the this creature that's I thought was pretty neat. Of course, it doesn't look comparable to horror creatures and something made a year ago or a couple of years ago. But I still think it looked imposing enough to be a pretty neat villain for the movie. In this movie, we also get to see what I've known to be iconic with Ash, is he gets the chainsaw arm in this movie. I've seen pictures of him with it. Before I watched the original movies, I thought that was something that was going to happen in the first one, but I didn't realize it doesn't happen till the second one. So to see it, that scene of him losing his hand and then using the chainsaw as his hand, it was a pretty neat scene. It's pretty iconic, not gonna lie. It was cool to see. And when he starts using it, there is some neat aspects to the fighting between Ash versus this stuff going on that it just made him a little more interesting. It was something different. So in this movie, there are more creatures to fight, but I feel like maybe they didn't last as long. I feel like when he cut off his hand, the demon still possessing his hand, that lasted, I think him versus the hand lasted longer than some of the other fights. Now, I could be wrong. That's just how I felt watching the movie. But like I said, we have our final boss fight for this movie, and it leads into a cliffhanger because in order to get rid of the evil dead in the woods, a portal opens up. And what happens in the finale is the rest of our expendable characters have perished, as expected. And Ash is the only one left, but he is sucked into this portal, where we see these medieval characters standing around him. And there's this winged bat thing coming toward him that he eliminates. So now he's sort of praised. And this is the final shot for the movie. It's him being treated like a god by the medieval men because he was sent back in time because of this portal. So I have no idea what Army of Darkness has in store for me. I don't know. There's going to be some sort of going back and forth in time kind of movie. I don't know, but I am excited. It's a neat concept, something different. It's definitely a neat choice for something that's sort of a standard horror franchise between the two movies, that now there's something so different for the third. So I'm excited to see it. I'll watch pretty soon. Thank you guys for sticking with me. I've been a Nerdy Movie Guy.